So John chapter 9, I spent a lot of time thinking this last week about that verse, which we talked a lot about last week as well, but I've been trying to memorize it. Verse 4 on chapter 9, we must quickly carry out the tasks assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming and then no one can work. Yeah. So it makes you think the purpose of life is to find out what it is that God wants us to do. So to quickly carry out the tasks assigned us by the one who sent us. So we are sent people. And I suppose through our giftings, through our circumstances in life, through what we understand of the big story of what God's doing in the world, taking all that together, we've got to work out what the task is that has been assigned to us.
Yeah.
And then to quickly set about living that out, doing that task as those who are sent, because the night is coming and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world.
Yeah.
And then we obviously know that he calls us the light of the world as well. So been thinking about that. Yeah, I don't know. I suppose it's the big challenge of how do you work out what it is that is your expression of carrying out the tasks assigned to us.
Yeah.
And I suppose I look at my world and I think, okay, I've got to shape this community that I'm part of and leading, and think of the young people that I'm connected with through my kids and through the youth group and my family, and influence at school. So probably taking time like Jesus did to really step back, connect with the Father, and live out of that sort of reality where we know we've got that relationship with the Father, we know what to focus on and where to go, and have that sort of purpose.
Yeah.
What about for you?
I think it's two levels. First of all, there's the big picture, the big picture that we've just been talking about, actually. And that's very, very clear. John wrote his gospel, like he said. There are many things that Jesus did, and these ones that are chosen in the gospel are written so that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ.
Yeah.
And that he's the Son of God, and you might have life in his name. I think John there is an example of doing exactly what you were talking about. He's got the big picture clear, and now for him it was just making a record of the things that he remembered and how he had understood them, how he'd understood what Jesus was saying, and doing the best he can to communicate it to others. When you look at it from our point of time, 2,000 years later, I am so thankful that John did what John did and put this stuff down, because it fills in the whole picture of our lives here and now. All the details of the things that Jesus said. So there's the big picture, and then of course coming down to the details, I have just as much trouble as you knowing what I should do. I'm glad that we've got this COVID-19 restrictions, because it kind of has held me back from launching out on my mission to just go and join some country town and be a life coach and spiritual director, and make a nuisance of myself around the town, see whether I can get any clients. But I'm sure I will get a whole heap of discussion going.
Yeah. Yep.
So, I just hope I don't get too old for it before these COVID restrictions are taken away. But because I'm going to have a crack at it, and I think that's that's for me. my contribution of doing the work that Jesus was sent into the world to do. And I think a lot of people will think I'm just a crackpot, some old guy who has lost it or something or other. But I have a confirmation in myself that I've got to do this because this is the best way I can see for me to use my experience of God and what I've understood, what I know, and how it works out in detail, what town, where I might end up getting mugged and who knows what. But anyway.
But in the past, though, you've had a lot of clarity about that. So, obviously you went and studied over in America and then joined Wycliffe and then joined Campus Crusade and came back to Australia, got led to start Cornerstone. Obviously that having a clear sense of what the big picture was and purpose in life has led you to wanting to help make disciples and really help people to grasp what it means to follow Jesus and to live that out in every aspect of their lives, and then to embrace and engage with God's mission.
Yeah.
That's been pretty clear. The details of how you do that, I suppose, are how different people do that, though, are, I suppose, up to them to work out with God and the Spirit working in them.
Lucas, I think I could have become a maybe even excellent, but anyway, a very good Bible translator. I think I could have continued to be in Campus Crusade and lead. There are all kinds of things that I could have done, and any one of them would have been okay.
Yeah.
I think I probably did what I did because I just couldn't. It just wasn't my nature to fit in with the administrative American sort of structure of evangelical Christian mission. And I think that's probably, I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Could be a fault, actually. So that's the other strand that comes in there. I mean, it's it's no sense now at my age to think I could become an athlete and compete and serve Christ through athletics. Circumstances and abilities and all that just is part of the picture as well. And there's a danger that we get too caught up in worrying about it.
About what to do.
Yeah. Because I think my greatest successes have been when I've completely failed, and I've had an impact that didn't really come out of my planning and my expectations, but sort of came obliquely. And I think...
What sort of things?
Should use an example. That came to mind as I was given an opportunity to become part of a church down in Tasmania.
Yep.
And I took the family down there, and just before we started Cornerstone, and I got involved in all kinds of things, students on campus and with the church, young people, and I feel like I could have done a whole lot more. I should have just gone out and went round the streets around the church, knocking on the door as the church representative. I wish I'd done that. I didn't. But when I look back at it now, I feel saying I'm ashamed of myself is probably too strong, but disappointed, not for myself. It was a great experience. Had some great experiences down there in the work of the kingdom. Did see big things happening, but in terms of the church, I think it was a failure. I really feel like it was an expensive. They bought a house for us and a car and supported us, and it was really expensive. But anyway, so I've had a lasting feeling that that whole venture was a failure. That I didn't achieve what I thought I could achieve. And then a few years later, I met one of the elders, and no longer in Tasmania, up here in the mainland. And in our conversation, he was over and over again talking about, for him personally, what a blessing it was for having us down there, and particularly things that had impacted his life. And what surprised me in this, I'm telling a long story, I suppose, to illustrate a little point, but he, it was never when I taught or confronted the old kind of staid people who didn't have much imagination, and it wasn't any of the kind of public ministry that I had, but it were little things that I said in conversation with him or with a group that were, they weren't what I had intended to do, but they were the things that were really impacting his life, had impacted his life. That's the sort of thing that I mean. Yeah. So that when Jesus talked about being born again, and he said the Spirit is like the wind, you don't know where it comes from, where it's going to, but you hear the sound of it, and that's how it is with the Spirit.
It seems though that there's sort of I don't know whether it's a battle or a conflict that goes on between, you get to a certain point, like you sort of follow the wind, you follow the Spirit, and things start to happen and people respond, and then you've got to organize yourself. And then you organize yourself, it means you've got to come up with a structure. And a structure, can become a bit institutional, and it can lose the heart of what you're originally doing in sort of following the Spirit. And I mean, not that you're not following the Spirit when you create that structure, but it just seems like there's a bit of a tension there. So part of me, I think you look at Jesus, and obviously he did have a big picture in mind in where he was heading, in that he wanted to make disciples, these disciples who could then go on and really understand who he was deeply at the heart of their beings and his message and his love for them, and then pass that on to others. So there was a bigger picture, but the way that he did it seems to be followed the threads that came along, like a blind man. He comes across a blind man who's been born from birth. They're walking past this guy, maybe they'd seen him lots of times before, and his disciples ask him the question. The question leads to him talking about sort of deeper truths about God's kingdom. He then heals him, and there's this big conflict that happens with the Jewish leaders in the background as well, and the Pharisees. So he's sort of following the threads of of what's happening. And so, I mean, is that sort of the key, that you do have to organize things. You do have to sort of shape things and create a bit of a structure to help care for people and help them to grow and learn. But then you've still got to live a life where you're open to those distractions, I guess you call them, that come along, where you're not so fast-paced and rushing around that you don't have time to take notice of those little things. When I was just thinking about this, I was sitting around this morning, caught up and had coffee with like 5 or 6 of the young men from our community, and there's two of them are becoming teachers, and one of them's in administration at the uni, and another one's a teacher, and another one's an engineer, and they're all in their mid-20s, and they're also talking about all the things that you probably do, like their wives and getting married, and they're starting to get into their careers. But thinking about that, I was talking about this same thing with them and saying, this need to pursue what we're called to do. What are the words again? I've got to memorize this. It's what?
While it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me.
That's it.
Night comes when no one can work.
Every morning I go over and over that. I still just can't get it in my head. Anyway, so talking with them about that, I probably totally lost track of my question in all of that. But can you see, something of what I'm saying?
Well, talking with those young men, and there are so many other things that at 25 years old you need to think about.
Yeah.
And I've sometimes I wonder about whether, like the sociologists talk about intense religion and then slack religion, which say dedicated and just conforming or nominal Christianity. And that's, I think, one of the huge temptations at that age is just to become nominal till you sort out everything else.
Yeah.
And I know for myself, I guess I came under the intense variety. And for me, you read things like, it really used to scare me when that parable of the seeds that were sown and the seeds that, like
the weeds grow up and choke it.
Weeds grow up.
The cares and the worries of this age.
Yeah. And so I deliberately turned away from all that, and I stopped, didn't care about my profession. I didn't care about marriage. I didn't care about home.
Yeah.
And just followed the flow of things, and that took me where it took me. But ended up here I am as an old age pensioner, depending on the government to survive and other people's grace.
But then when you look at that, Jesus said to his disciples, if you've given up this much, then he'll multiply it. And the impact that you've had, so many people who've been blessed by what you've chosen to do and the energy that you put in, who've then blessed others. Yeah, it's huge.
I don't think it's huge. Like, I sit here feeling frustrated at the COVID-19 because I can't do what I think I could do as an 84-year-old retiree or something. But when I look back, I think, no, I've really only just started. I could have done so much better and I didn't. That sort of thing is what sort of covers the past for me.
Yeah. I mean, some of it's sort of reliant on the age that we live in as well. You started a movement. What are the things that hindered that movement from continuing to grow? And I think it is the cares and the worries of this age.
I'm sure of it.
And so you look at someone like Wesley. He was the right person at the right time of history. And Wycliffe and those guys. Yeah. Because the things were ripe and ready for that sort of transformation. I guess things were pretty dire as well in their societies. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I have to say this, that Alveda and I are as content as we can be. Apart from for me, I'm not sure for Alveda, but for me, the feeling that there's something more out ahead that I've got to grasp. I've got to, for myself as well as for a ministry of helping others see the light and and come to Christ.
Mm.
But sometimes, good night's sleep, shower, dress, breakfast, sit down under the heater and just feel no pain, no hunger, no exposure to the elements, just in that moment, totally satisfied.
Mm.
Yeah. Having said my prayers and read my Bible beforehand and thinking about things that are way ahead, the future. And it really is true. I think I sometimes wonder how I would be if I was living in a place like Mali or over in Africa, or where you've got Muslim extremists trying to kill you and destroying your crops,
Mm.
and where you're really hungry and there's no medical services and that sort of thing, whether I'd still have the same contentment. I hope so, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So there's a contentment that comes from those physical things you talk about, but there's also a deep spiritual contentment where you have rest as well, because you know who you are and who Jesus is and how he views you, and you've meditated and dwelt in that reality for a long time.
yeah.
There's a contentment that comes from that as well. And I suppose that's the one that you hope would keep you going if things aren't as easy.
You hope so. You hope so. I mean, Jesus was under huge threat those last chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 8. That's pretty intense kind of, he's wanted by they want to kill him and he knows it. The only thing that holds them back, I guess, is because they weren't quite ready. They didn't have their case lined up yet. They're constantly arguing with him in front of the crowd, the Jews, the Sanhedrin, Pharisees and Sadducees. And there was one occasion when, and all the time, the people in the background are saying, I wonder, is he the Messiah or isn't he?
Yeah, they were divided.
In one place, it says how that they said he can't be the Messiah because when the Messiah comes, we don't know where he comes from, but we do know he's the son of Mary, Joseph and Mary. So, and Jesus said, no doubt you know me. No doubt you know where I come from on the human level. He said, I did not come of my own accord. I was sent by the one who is. I know him, but you don't know. I come from him, and he it is who sent me. I know him, and you don't know him. And upset them, and they tried to arrest him and take him up to the Jews. But I think that I know where I come from, and I know where I'm going to. In terms of the big picture, God made me. I am who I am because he made me to be who I am, and he rescued me and set me free to be who I am. And I know where I'm going. The life of Jesus kind of sets is the model, and we can find ourselves in him. And I think what I'm striving to do is to put my thinking in line with his thinking,
Yeah.
much smaller scale, obviously, and not claiming to be God, but claiming to be a child of God because of what Jesus did, and thinking as a child of God in the middle of the world. I think that's probably everything else. On the big picture, we've got it clear. And then within ourselves, we've got the model there in the life of Jesus. And I'm astonished how, sometimes a little bit embarrassed to talk about it actually, but how Jesus' experience as he talks about it is, my experience mirrors that.
Mm.
And I'm not sure that he was that he really knew that he was going to meet that blind man, and you know, just as he went on his way, he saw a man who had been blind from birth.
Yeah.
It was because the disciples said, "Who sinned, this man or his parents? Why was he born blind?" And then Jesus said, it's not that he or his parents sinned. He was born blind so that the power of God may be displayed in curing him." Then he went ahead and cured him. And you know, if we could see all of life like that.
Yeah. I think that's the key there. Like you mentioned before, that Jesus was under heaps of opposition. And there was obviously a lot of pressure that was coming from that. But still within that pressure, he just seems to be able to respond calmly to the challenges or the opportunities that arise right throughout. You know, he's able to just step in and give a response which is inspiring and challenging at the same time.
Yeah.
But he's not kind of hurried by it, or he's not flustered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get a phone call.
I do. I don't know what to do about it. It should stop.
Yeah, it's all right.
It did. Yeah, you know, and I think, like,
because he wasn't worried? You know, like we get under that sort of pressure, and you start to worry, and you sort of fret and fuss around, and woe is me or whatever. But he just seems so content in knowing that he's living out of the will of his Father and doing his Father's work, that, you know, he's not battered by those things.
And you know, Peter said, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, put your case before God and trust him."
Yeah.
Peter learned that from Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think this chapter 9 is a good example of how the circumstance arose. Jesus went ahead and spoke as he saw things from his point of view, which is the big picture of God's purposes in the world. He went ahead and healed the man, and then, like, it stands out so much in contrast to the previous 3 or 4 chapters where there's so much intense dialogue and debate between Jesus and his enemies. And here Jesus is at the beginning and at the end, and he just leaves the van by himself with all of these enemies trying to force him to, it's ridiculous, you know. The bloke is there. He's just been healed from a lifelong blindness, and they're trying to convince him that this did not come from God. You know?
Yeah.
And Jesus somehow or other trusts the logic of the whole case, and that the man is going to come through. I don't know, his parents knew what had happened, but they, for fear of the Jews, wouldn't back the man who'd been healed.
Yeah.
But the more they questioned him, the more he's able to say, well, look, this fact I know. I was blind, now I can see. This bloke must have come from God. There's no other explanation.
Yeah.
So I think Jesus could trust that the logic of the situation would lead through, so that the bloke would respond to that big picture, the truth.
Yeah. And it stands out that that's what happens.
If only people would be genuine.
Yeah.
I think more and more I'm convinced, I think that we've got to challenge people to think rationally, to think logically. Satan has convinced us that the only way to think is to think in terms of cause and effect and experiment to prove that you've got the right conclusion. But truth is bigger than that. Science is a part of truth, but revelation brings the full truth, the revelation of God's purpose. And I think we have to convince people just simply to think about it.
Yeah.
And you see that happening here with this blind man who was healed. And
he joins the dots.
Yeah. And it's Jesus is out of the picture altogether. But he trusts the facts, and he trusts the man's experience of being forced to face the facts and to think rationally. And after he's been rejected, it's so beautiful. It says how Jesus found him.
Yeah.
And brought him into that relationship, brought him into fellowship with him. Yeah.
So he finishes off the chapter. I entered this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and to show those who think they see that they are blind. And some Pharisees who were standing nearby heard him and asked, "Are you saying we're blind? If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty," Jesus replied, "but you remain guilty because you claim you can see."
And that would have been one huge surprise for the Pharisees. I mean, they'd already talked about blindness and sight. I'm the light of the world. He who comes to me will not wander in dark, but shall have the light of life. And they'd argued against Jesus making that claim. And when they said, "Do you mean that we're blind?" And they expected him to say, "Of course you are. I've told you over and over again." But he doesn't say that. He says, if you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty. And that would have really made them
angry.
Well, where do you go from there?
Yeah.
He's saying, if you really were blind, that'd be an excuse for you, but you haven't got that excuse.
Yeah, without excuse. Yep. Because they claim they can see and they're leading others astray.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the worst kind of thing.
It's so beautiful just the way Jesus could go through the surface into the depths and once again bring people face to face with the deeper issue of whose side are you on?
Yeah.
Your own side or God's side?
Yeah, and that's the thing we keep coming back to as well.
Yeah.
There's that choice we've got to make. Do you want to live just to satisfy your own kind of agenda and needs, or will you admit and follow Jesus as the King?
Yep, exactly that.
Right, we better finish it there. Run out of time.
Yeah, we have again. Sorry about taking so long.
No, I was asking all the questions.
Yeah, well, you're the one making all the sense too, actually.
I don't think so.
Bless you. Hey, so you'll be away next week?
Yeah, I'll be away next week, but we can meet the week after.
Okie doke. Bless you. And will you be up at the, are we having the living room this morning up at the church?
Yep.
Lee was talking about wanting to be baptized.
Great.
And I said that here, that it's really the church that would have to baptize him, not me.
Yep.
And that he should come and talk to you because you're the leader of the church.
Yep.
At the old church on the hill. And it's a bit of a challenge. I said, well, come over by bus from Eaglehawk to meet you this morning if you're going to be there.
Yeah.
So he might turn up around about 11:30.
Okay. Well, I'll be up there.
If not, I'll bring him sometime to talk to you. And
yeah. So I'll be around, won't be around next week, but I'll be around a bit more the week after. We might go away for a few days.
Yeah.
But we'll have the gathering again on, so not this Sunday, not the next one, but the next one. Okay. So the 11th of July is when the gathering will be on again, so you can connect with me then as well.
Okay. Excellent. And I told him that I would baptise him if it was summertime, but that you'd probably want to do it if it was winter.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Bless you.
Okay, Laurie. Bye.
Bye.